Bill Bishop, man. It's great to see you.
It's great to see
It's
you,
been a long time. Forever, you've had a huge presence in the tarpon world. You're an artist. You've written a book. Tell me about when you first saw a tarpon and how all of a sudden it basically your whole life has been consumed by a couple of things, and one is a turkey and one is a tarpon. Let's talk about tarpon.
We had a home over on Mosquito Lagoon, and mostly we fished redfish and trout. But I was hearing about all you guys down in the Keys and watching the shows.
But you started doing this before I started fishing for tarpon,
well,
didn't
I think
you?
so. But I'm just saying all you guys, meaning all you hardcore.
Oh, yeah, right.
And so I decided that I saw some fish up behind a elementary school, and I told my son, let's go up there and see if we can catch one. We took a 9-weight and went into this little basin, and they were 40, 50 pounders. And I thought, well, they ought to like a lefty's deceiver. I mean, that seems like something they'd eat, and threw that thing out there, and one ate it. And it'd like to kill both of us. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no clue. And had him on an 8-weight. And
what year was this, Bill?
That might have been, I'm going to have to think about it. But Billy was probably in the 80s, 90s, late 90s. Anyway,
That's when you first saw tarpon.
Yeah.
Late 90s.
Well, no, I'd seen tarpon, but I never
First time
paid
you
much.
started catching
I
them.
never paid much mind to them.
So you were after me. I was already doing it then.
Yeah. So we caught it, and I told my son, I said, grab that thing, and he did, and he couldn't hold on.
I know. Wrestling, turtle wrestle.
Yeah. So we were late getting out of there. It was dark, and I took off, and I had a little tiller boat, and hit the throttle with it, turned it, and the engine comes off and sunk, fell in the water. So I said,
the engine came off the boat.
Yeah. And so we paddled home, and that was it. I told him later, I said, that wasn't the best experience we ever had, but I'm going to do some more of that. I'm pretty hooked on this right now. So found tarpon in the lagoon, and nobody had ever talked about him. And
This is the Indian River Lagoon?
yeah, but it was the big water in the lagoon. And so I couldn't catch them. They were rolling, and they were screwing down underneath their roll. You've seen them do that.
Yeah.
And they'd kick their tail up at the end.
They go right back down to the bottom.
Right down and blow air bubbles.
Yep.
And but I was thinking they were going to be over here because that's the direction they were heading.
Right.
So Tommy Locke was there seeing his in-laws, and I said, I got some tarpon out here, but I can't catch them. So he said, hell, let's go catch them. So he took a plug rod, and we went out there, and he said, you throw out the air bubbles. And I said, all right. And so he throws over there and that's it. And so
learned how to catch them.
He unlocked that door.
It's funny you mention Tommy Locke, because when I first fished Homosassa, I only fished there, maybe a couple of years, but only maybe 10 days for the 2 years. But you've been with Tommy for 25 years or so.
Or longer.
Yeah.
Closer to 35.
Yeah. Let's shift topics here briefly, because your artwork is so profound. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
If you don't know Bill Bishop, the artist, you should.
No, that's kind of you.
No, but it's true. I mean, when I first got into it, I went to Sandy Moret's shop, and down in the Keys, and he had a couple of your prints, and the tarpon with a little fly, and I think there's a bonefish.
Yeah.
I got them hanging out in my house in Aspen.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
But then you wrote this book, so you've really had a big, it's been a big part of your life. Was there anybody that influenced you other than just the tarpon itself?
I look at the guys that grew up down in the Keys, and they all watch your podcast, which I love it.
Thank you.
My grandchildren love it. We all watch every one of them. My wife likes it, She doesn't eat tarpon fish.
That says a lot when, when the wives like it.
Yeah, she does. But I really didn't have anybody except when I met Tommy that could relate to tarpon. Everybody fished for redfish and the trout in the lagoon. And when we sold our company in '99, and this is hard for me to believe saying it, but I'd never been to the Keys. And I was born here in Orlando.
Right.
I just never been.
Mm-hmm.
And it was difficult because I was trying to run a company and had 58 people. And so, I didn't know whether to go when business was good or bad.
Right.
So I didn't go. And so everything I fished was close. Mosquito Lagoon. And then Boca Grande after that. And so, no, I wasn't spurred on by a buddy that liked to tarpon fish or anything like that. But I'd had that experience with him, and I thought, this has got to be it.
Well, I know you and Flip are big friends, and he was a big inspiration to me. And I've said this a number of times on the podcast before I'd ever even seen a saltwater fish. Tell me about your relationship with Flip and Lefty both.
I never would have met Lefty without Flip. That was on my list, was to meet him. That might have been number 4 or 5. It was right up there.
And we'll talk about that list you had after your heart attack here in a minute.
Yeah, but so Flip made that possible, and he made so many things possible for me. He was bigger than life. I'd watched his shows. I was all into it. And the first time I met him, we ended up talking about turkey hunting. And so that's the first thing we did together. We started turkey hunting together. And, we just, it was incredible. I mean, they had so many turkeys on this piece of property. And I don't know if the statute of limitations has come up yet. I don't think I ought to go into that. But we killed our share. And, but it was incredible. And
you ended up on his show, Walker's Cay.
I did.
2 or 3 times,
That's
right?
Yeah.
What were you fishing for? Where were you?
Mosquito Lagoon. And then one trip to Boca Grande. And it was cool. It was so cool for me. I didn't have the pedigree, that a lot of fellas had down there in the Keys, or someone would pick them up like a seasoned angler would pick that up and say, "Come here, I got some stuff I want to show you." So when Flip came along, he was that guy, and so being on his show, it was just hard for me to believe. I never dreamed that I would end up on it.
I was on one of his shows after Walker's. I was so damn nervous.
I was
right?
Too. I was
too. You have a camera, you were with Flip.
It was so funny. They were shooting film. And you remember the sound guy? I wish I could remember his name. And the other one. But they couldn't separate the sound from the film. So whatever was said was permanently on that film.
Right.
And they started charging me $100 every time I swore. I was down a lot, I said, I didn't know you could fish without cussing, And Flip said something like fricking, and I said, $100. And he said, no. I said, yeah, that's because it's his show. That's
right.
crap, man. That ain't fair. But it was so fun. And he just, he has a way with words. He's going to shoot me for telling this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. We were duck hunting, and we'd killed a number of ducks. We had a layout boat in the airboat, and we'd take turns getting in the layout boat. And we pulled up to this area where we were cleaning our ducks on the tailgate of the truck, and these 2 fellas come along and they see Flip, and the guy walks over and he said, I know you. And Flip said, you know me? He said, yeah, you're the fishing poet And I started laughing. I couldn't contain myself. I was howling, and he turned around and he says, "Don't you ever repeat that story." I said, "I'm going to tell everybody that." But he's just got this way of,
He speaks differently. So
does.
he is...
Yeah, it's almost like I don't even want to say anything when I'm around him because I feel so stupid.
I do too.
He does have a way with words, and the way he forms sentences is...
I mean, his language is an art form.
It is.
And Tom McGuane, it's not an art form. It's just really smart, really intelligent. It's like you shudder, you know, when you want to say something.
I was the comic on most of the stuff. I was always having fun and cutting up, and we'd be running airboats, and I'd see a real thin body of water, and I'd run over there and do circles in it, you know. He's dragging along, going, "You need to come on, you know."
Well, he told me one of the most epic fishing or tarpon battles was with you.
Yeah.
When you were fishing 6-pound test by yourself. Now that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, bro. Sorry.
I know.
So tell me about that story.
That's a crazy story. We were catching enough tarpon in the lagoon, and it was a closed body of water. It might as well have been. I mean,
And fairly shallow too.
it was 7 feet, average 7 foot depth. And in order for the fish to get out into deep water anywhere, they had to go all the way up to Ponce Inlet, which was 15, 18 miles. And the other way, it was further. So the fish would come in there and they would screw down. They would under the rolls. And I thought, well, this would be a place to try 6-pound, because the fish really can't get you out into the Gulf or can't get you in deep water. So I used a 9 weight. And I couldn't find a wide gap hook that had a thin wire. And so I took a circle hook that had a real thin wire, and I cut the tip off of it and then fashioned a point on it with a file. And I called Lefty. I said, "This is what I want to do." And he really wasn't all that for it. But he said, "I will tell you this. Do 100 turn biminis at the top of the class tippet." And I thought, well, now why is that? And he said, well, it won't affect your IGFA because it's at the top, and it'll give you more stretch.
100 turn.
100 turn biminis. So
he used to tie him with an electric drill.
That's what I tied him with.
Wow.
Electric drill.
Yeah, you can spin it really fast.
And what'll happen is when you run the drill, it'll pull your hand because you put an Allen wrench in there, and the Allen wrench is offset. So it pulls you.
Interesting.
You count the pulls. And I only tied 1 or 2 without the drill. And I said, I got to get a drill. My hand's tired. But you're right. I was ill prepared in my wildest dreams. I didn't think that I would ever get this done. And so I went out. I had a whip ray with a 25 on it. And the fish was laying up. About $1.20, 115, and I thought, well, that'll do it.
Yeah, well,
I think the record at the time was
82 and a half. That was Stu App's record.
Threw the fly over there, and like Lefty would say, it was like rolling a wine bottle in a jail cell. What I'd had a problem with, and again, I didn't have anybody to
mentor you or teach you. Yeah.
Right,
or run the boat.
Yeah.
Have a gaff.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know. And so I was guessing. And what would happen with most of the fish is they'd get out there and then turn, and the pressure of that turn and the fly line would break the 6. So if you didn't break them off on the hook set, you broke them off because they'd get too much line on you before you get the boat started. And
did you cut your fly line back?
No.
We used to cut our fly lines way back, so there was not such a long.
See, I should have called you because so I need to get some advice. But this fish went dead straight. And so I realized that I was outgunned. I'm trying to run a tiller skiff and fight the fish.
On 6. 130-pound fish on 6.
115, 120.
You probably came up with this thought of doing this after a good bottle of wine the night before.
I probably have. I'm sure that's happened. So I called Flip, and I said, I got a little problem here. And he said, what is it? And I explain to
So
him.
now you're fighting a 6-pound fish, running a tiller, and you
On
got
the
the
phone.
Talking on the phone. And Flip was on the way to the post office. And he said, I'll be right there. Now, I'm in the middle of the lagoon. He drives to Lafay's Fish Camp, which is, some distance away, but not that far. Catches a ride with 2 young fellas who I knew one of them's dad. And they are more than happy, to
Right.
put Flip in the boat. And so they bring him to me. And he gets on the boat. I'll never forget what he said. He gets on the boat and he goes, Bonanza. That's what he always said. He said,
Bonanza.
Bonanza, yeah. And
what'd that mean?
it just meant we're going to catch him.
We're in the game.
We're going to catch him. And he said, I'll be the jaws of life. It'll be like the jaws of life. We'll grab him. And he didn't say anything about not having a kill gaff, until later. But we could have stroked that fish so many times. I mean, at least that's the way I recall it. I mean, I'm up on the front and I'm looking at the fish right there. Well, the whole day went through and we had a hell of a lightning storm, which
The whole day. How many hours are you talking now?
I hooked him at about 9 and it's late in the afternoon and lightning storm cooled us off and then it got dark. And so we're still behind the fish. I said, Flip, she's got to get tired. And he said, well, they're pretty good at swimming. So, oh, crap. So when it got dark, I've never seen, when I was a kid, old timers called it fire in the water, the phosphorescence in the water.
Sure.
I've never seen it like that before. It was incredibly bright, this bluish, greenish hue it was gorgeous.
So when the fish is swimming, you could see that coming off of its sides like
everything.
like an airfoil.
He'd kick his tail and you
Right.
could see the whole fish. I mean, see the leader. You could see everything. And so we're behind the fish. The fish goes out, gets in the ICW and steaming north. And so that went on. I remember must have been 1 o'clock in the morning. And my son had heard that we were fighting this fish. So he drove from Orlando, put his boat in, came out there, set up a little...
Drove from Orlando?
Yeah. Drove and launched the boat, came out there, and set up a little bar. And Flip was having a cocktail. My son was having a cocktail. Scott Tripp, who's a
This is
guy,
crazy.
he comes out there and joins us, and he's having a cocktail. I said, somebody fix me a cocktail. He said, no way. No, that's not going to happen, And so anyway, we're steaming along, and I said to Flip, probably 1 o'clock, I said, Flip, look at the fireworks. And he called me Duck. And
How'd you get that name?
well, he's in charge of naming people. Flip is.
Duck was just Duck.
No, he said that I can look like I'm so relaxed, and yet under the water, my feet are going like this. That was my brain going crazy.
So when you're fighting this fish, he was calling you Goose.
He called me Duck. So he said,
Duck?
there's no fireworks at 1 a.m. I mean, it's not, there's no reason for that. And I said, well, look at him. And he looks and I turned around and looked at him and he was scratching his beard, which is what he did a lot.
Sure.
When he didn't quite know what was happening, he'd scratch his beard. And he said, porpoise. I said, what's porpoise? And he said, your fireworks are porpoise. And what was happening, I've never seen this before. It's like something out of Avatar, the movie Avatar.
Right, sure.
The porpoise were coming toward us from the north. We're going north. And they were blowing that phosphorescent water out of their blowholes.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh.
And the water would go up and it looked like there goes the Roman candle. There it goes.
Wow.
And there's 3 of them. So it's constant. And we couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just something like crazy. And so the porpoise were coming this way and the tarpon's going this way. And when the porpoise got to the tarpon, they spun around. And you can see it. I mean, it's not like you think that's what they did. You can see the porpoise clear as day. You can see the tarpon clear as day. And in the meantime, all this phosphorescent stuff's flying through the air. And it was just like, this is a dream. It's crazy. And the porpoise would go underneath the tarpon and over the top of the tarpon. I said, they're going to break my leader. And he said, porpoise don't run into anything accidentally. And so I took him at his word. I mean, I'm sure he was right.
Right.
And that went on for like 15 minutes or so with the porpoise and the tarpon. I've seen that before with tarpon in Boca Grande since.
Mm-hmm.
Do they know that tarpon is in distress and they're trying to help that tarpon out?
It has to be that. And I'll tell you why. But I've seen them shoulder to shoulder feeding, eating seahorses in Boca Grande off the beach.
Wow.
And I mean, like that, sipping them off the top and off grass. So after a little while, the porpoise spun off and went right by the boat. And I watched this porpoise go by and he turns up on its side and looks at you. And you go, that's cool, And all of a sudden the fish goes, turns around. Now, he'd been steaming north for several hours. Now he's going with the with the porpoise. And he's right behind him. So this little trio of porpoise with the tarpon are going the other way. So Flip's turning the skiff around, get the boat turned around, and line's peeling off the reel, just faster than it had for a very long time. Big explosion in the water. Looked like somebody had thrown a Volkswagen out there some distance away, not that far, 40 yards, 30 yards. Line went limp. And Flip goes, I don't believe in this stuff. I don't believe in the good night, John Boy, the animals are talking to each other. He said, there's no way that I can believe it, but that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, porpoise broke your line.
They did.
Wow.
And on the heels of saying they don't run into stuff accidentally.
Right.
And
that was 16 hours later.
16 hours.
After you hooked that fish.
Yeah. And I remember looking at Flip and he said, Duck, gosh. And I said, have you ever had more exciting experience in your life? I haven't. There was no coulda, shoulda, woulda. There wasn't any of that. No anger, no.
It was beautiful in every way.
Incredible. Just. So my son took Flip back to his car. I think that's what happened. And then Scott Tripp had a boat there. And Scott and I are running back to my house on the water. And he's going back to his wife, who was upset at him because he'd left a cocktail party in his house and just left all his guests.
It was a big party.
It was a big party. I think we were having more fun than they were. And we stopped in a bay. I could take you to the bay. And I shut the engine off and I was going to finish my cocktail. And I looked out there and it was slick. And all you could see was mullet landing on their sides in that bay. Just
wow,
big,
how cool.
Big light pools. And I said to Scott, who's a dear friend, God, what a great guy. I said, Scotty, don't ever forget this. This is one of those things that you hold on to. I said, you just keep it in your brain. And he said, I will. And we always talk about it.
You're right.
Mm-hmm. I have this trick. It's silly, but when I go to bed, I pre-think about something to think about before I fall asleep. I do it every night. And it's something that brings me great pleasure, joy, happiness. And I found that if I do that, that's the way I wake up. But if I go to sleep worried or angry, that's the way I wake up. And so I pick that story a lot.
Interesting.
I go back to that story and I go, I remember that. I remember this happened. And I go through it and fall asleep. But yeah, it's a one in a lifetime experience.
What a story.
Well, you said The greatest thing that ever happened to you was a heart attack.
Yeah, it was.
How'd that change your life?
I had just sold, we had just sold our company, and I was 49, and I was a workaholic. I didn't know when to stop. And it had gotten to the point where for the last 3 years, I wasn't that excited about it. It had gotten a lot, and I was tired. And so when we sold the company, at that point, I called my wife. It was 2 a.m. when we closed. I said, pack a bag. We're going out. We're going somewhere. So I ran home about 3 o'clock. We were in the car going north. And she said, we went over the Lake Monroe Bridge. And she said, we've never been to the Keys. I went down the ramp, turned around, and went south. Went to Chica Lodge. And for 6 months, life was just incredible. I mean, it was total freedom and wonderful feeling. And then I was down at my hunting camp, killed a deer at mid-morning, and it was a bad shot, and the deer got off from me, and kept looking for the deer, and found him about 8 o'clock at night. A guy brought a dog in, and the deer was in a swamp. I was up to my waist, and one little part of the horn was sticking out of the water.
Wow, it's amazing that dog found him.
Good dog.
Yeah.
And so we got the deer. It was cold, so I brought the deer back, skinned him, gutted him, hung him in the cooler, and called my wife, said, I'm going to stay here tonight, drive home in the morning. I'm really tired. And she said, no, come home tonight. And so I said, all right. So I got in the car and drove home. And 2 or 3 hours later, woke up, chest pains, nauseated, slipped out of bed, went downstairs, standing at the kitchen, and hit the floor. And I remember thinking, I wonder what this could be. You got chest pains and short of breath, nauseated, and your left hand.
You don't want to accept the fact of what you're experiencing because you know what it is.
Yeah, I prayed I did. And she got me on my feet and put me in the car and drove to the hospital. I was sure I was going to die in a car wreck. She's so cool. Best thing that ever happened to me was Janie. I mean, she is an amazing, amazing person. And got to the hospital and I passed out in the car. And I woke up and I see these white lights. Well, of course, I'm thinking it's Jesus,
Right.
It can't be all bad. And it's not. This helicopter pilot had gotten me out of the car and was running down the hallway, and they were fluorescent lights. It wasn't Jesus at all. It was fluorescent. I think a lot of people see fluorescent lights, that or airbags. They're white.
They say, I saw heaven.
I saw heaven.
It was the ceiling of the hospital.
It was a fluorescent lights. And so they ended up putting 2 stents in. I didn't have any heart damage. And but I was pissed. I was angry about it. I had this I finally get some freedom, and then this. And Janie said, you gotta think different. You gotta look at you. You're sitting here. You didn't die, and you got
a second chance.
You did, and she was right. And so I asked the nurse to bring me a pad and a piece of paper, and I wrote out 25 dreams that I was going to go do. Number 1 was get healthy. And but during the procedure of putting the stents in, the surgeon said, we found that you've got a faulty heart valve. It's a bicuspid valve. Instead of a Mercedes emblem, yours is a slit. And a certain number of people, it's not that unusual. And but he said, you need to watch that and watch it carefully. And so every 6 months I'd go to the doctor, cardiologist. Everything was great until it wasn't great. And after about 15 years. And the doctor, he said, you got to have surgery. You got to get a new heart valve. And I said, that's a pretty big deal. And he said, yeah, it's a big deal. You know, they cut you open. And he said, we're going to do a bypass when we're in there. I said, well, when you got the hood up, might as well fix everything, you know. So they did. They put a bovine heart valve in me. And he said to me, you know, it's so good you were watching this, because had you not been watching it, it'd have killed you mid-step, your aortic valve. And he said, and that thing was shot when I took it out of there. I never would have known that I had the problem without the heart attack. Never would have known. Never would have watched it.
Interesting.
It would have taken me out. And so, I mean, you got to look back on that and go, what a gift.
So what were the 25 items on that list?
Most of them, well, like I said, get healthy was number one. I wanted to catch a blue.
Do things.
Yeah. I wanted to catch a blue marlin on a fly rod. Flip had been. And one of my great friends had done that too. And so I said, well, I'll go do it. So a buddy of mine took off, and we went to Portofino, Venezuela, and I did it.
Right.
And it's not fly fishing.
No, again, no. It's like, yeah.
It's not. And they said, well, you take the boat out of gear. Well, yeah, that thing will go for another mile, you know.
Sure.
And but it was the eat was crazy.
We caught like a 250-pound blue marlin in St. Thomas on a beer can.
On a beer can?
Beer can.
No.
We were down there. I was doing a TV show. We caught a really big 700-pound fish the day before on conventional. I eventually caught one on a fly rod, but we were just messing around. I said, I bet we could catch one on a beer can. So we took a roll of tape and taped a big 9-0 hook to a beer can. Teased up this big marlin. He came flying in. We threw this beer can out behind this fish and popped it a couple times. You know, he turned around and ate the beer can.
No.
Caught him.
Really?
I have a question. How would Tom Evans and all these world record chasers feel about the fact that you just said fly fishing for marlins, not fly fishing?
Well, he was saying it's not that hard. But what they did, what was hard about it, they were catching these big blue marlin on light tippet. He caught a 274-pound blue marlin on 16-pound test tippet.
Unbelievable.
It's not hard to hook them, but to catch big fish,
Unbelievable.
that's hard.
Yeah, and this fish that I caught was 175, 150.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, problem was for me, I'm 5 months after getting out of the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have the sea legs and all that, but I was bound and determined to do it.
And you checked it off your list.
Yeah, I did. I caught the fish. It got tail wrapped.
That's hard.
Came up backwards.
Yeah.
And
well, tell me about your Hatteras. You bought a Hatteras too.
I did.
How did that change your life, other than checking a number off your list?
Big dream. Janie and I found the boat. It was in St. Augustine. It was a 54 hat. I figured if I was all in on tarpon fishing, which I was, that the boat could complement that. We were fishing Boca Grande at that time. And I got a little tired of sitting in Boca Grande hearing about all your fish down in the Keys. You know, I'm going, this sucks. Plus, you know, I'd always wanted, I love boats.
You built your own boat?
I did. And so we went over and looked at this 54 hat, and we're standing at the dock, and we bought it. And we're both standing there looking at each other. And she said, so what now? And
what do we do? Yeah.
I said, I don't even know how to start the damn thing. I had no idea.
Got a boat?
No, I got a boat. So I talked to a guy named John Huff, who was a captain. And John says, I'll show you how to run it. Yeah. So I hired him, who became a great pal. And he said, I'll show you how to run the boat and work all the systems on the boat. And so he'd call me up, and it was blowing 20. And he said, all right, let's go. And I go, it's blowing 20. And he said, I know, let's go. And he started out with me backing up to the channel markers. you can't really hurt anything backing up to channel markers. So I'd back up to the channel marker, and he'd say, all right, now do it the other way, with going with the tide. I'd do it there. What's cool about getting a little older is that a lot of things go downhill, but one thing goes vertical, and that's you don't get intimidated. Not much intimidates you anymore. The older you get, you have your opinions, and if somebody doesn't like it, to hell with it. It's what you do. And nothing scared you anymore. I used to say to Tommy,
especially after a heart attack.
Yeah, I told Tommy, I've seen the boogeyman. This is not the boogeyman. And I'll never forget it. Huff says to me one day, put it in that slip right there. 82,000-pound boat. And I looked at that slip and blowing, tide going the opposite way.
Oh my God, I'd be pooping.
I looked down at my hands, and my hands were trembling. And he goes, what's that? And I said, that's something I haven't seen in a long time. I said, damn, man. Can we find another slip? He said, put it in that slip. And I did it. It wasn't pretty. And all the boat owners on either side were
shuddering,
throwing out their bumpers, and everything's soft, but got it in there. And so, he finally graduated me and said, you're good to go. And so Janie and I got in that boat, and we were idling up to Ponce Inlet, and there was a place in St. Augustine that had a rock and roll band, and we wanted to go up there on the boat. That was our maiden voyage, alone. And we're idling, just getting out of the inlet, and she said, can you believe this is us? I said, no, I can't, because we hadn't done that, but this is a whole new thing, all this freedom and doing all these things. And we're tooling along 5 miles off the beach. She said, now, how do you know where we're going? I said, it's pretty simple. You go out Ponce Inlet and take your first left, because that's the next navigable. We went in there. We had the greatest trip. It was awesome. It was so neat. And we took a lot of trips together on the boat down south. Right. And
you took it down outside of Shark, down in the Everglades.
I did. She wasn't on that trip.
But you used that as a mothership with skiffs to go fishing and come back to the...
Anchored off the Shark.
I mean, a lot of people have always, had that as a pipe dream.
It was unbelievable. Tommy had a client from New York. I was there. My brother brought his 47 in, lashed up to our boat. And we had several of those trips, and incredible. Yeah. And then I would leave there. Tommy would head back to the Lorelei, and I'd leave there with my brother and his boat, and I'd go up about halfway to Marathon, where I could jump over, get in the intercoastal.
Go through Vacacut.
Yep. I think it's what it was.
Yep.
And then I'd go north and bring it up to the Lorelei. And I'd look at that little opening in that basin.
Right.
You know that little
I know exactly where you're talking.
And it was 6.5 feet. And I needed 6. And Tommy had the push pole in front of me. It was getting dark, but I could hear the drum music. The guys playing the tin can music, I call it. And I was going in there.
It was Jimmy Buffett and the Coral Reef Band.
Yeah, that's right. But I thought, I'm going in there. And I went like this to Tommy, move out of the way. And he said, no. I said, move out of the way. And I bumped it. I don't know. I
would have been so nervous.
I had
God.
Idea how I didn't hit bottom. But got it down there and spun it around. And the next day we were practicing for the Gold Cup.
Wow. So you stayed on your boat when you fished the Gold Cup. That was in 2010.
Yep. Unbelievable. I mean,
what did you think of tournament fishing?
I got to tell you, it was a high water mark in my life. Like I said, in Boca Grande, I'd fished with good anglers, not guides. I've hired one guide in my life, and I've hired Tommy many, many, many times, but I've never had another guide.
Did he ask you to fish the Gold Cup, or did you ask him?
He did. He came to me and said, "I want you to fish the Gold Cup." And it was like Santa Claus.
I think that was right after I quit fishing.
How great is Tommy?
You weren't there. I went there thinking, I'm going to get to meet Andy Miller. It's going to be the greatest thing in the world.
And I'm going to beat him.
I never said that. Trust me, I never said that. But you know what? It was to be around 25 anglers and 25 or 24, because I'm one of them, guides that are the best in the world. And there I am at that, the likes of me in that environment. And Andy, I can't even describe it. I remember going to the meetings. That one night they had the meeting.
The angler meeting on Wednesday night.
Yeah. And I remember listening to how painful it was to come up with a way that was the best thing for the fish.
Right.
It wasn't the turn. It was, this is the right way to do it. And then going to the Calcutta, we're sitting there and they're bidding things up. And I remember I was going to buy the team, our team.
Right.
And, but the number was getting up there, and not because we were good, just because we were fresh bait.
Yeah. You're forced.
Yeah. And, I think I yelled out, this is great. If somebody just showed Tommy and I where the boat ramp is, that'd be really cool, But I can't even describe it for me. My favorite part of it was, and I have to say, I wrote about this in that book that I wrote, Double Haul, was waiting for the horn.
Yeah, that's a special moment.
Yeah.
And
so that's the fleet in the morning. They shoot the horn, and the group of 5 anglers
5 boats.
take off full speed.
That's right.
Wait 5 minutes, another group.
And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, how cool is this? And you'd watch the flights go out and you could see their stern lights.
Yep.
And you're sitting in your boat.
It's pitch black.
It's pitch black.
It's 5:45 and 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and you'd see their stern lights and it looked like dying embers. Way out there.
They're going 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, just hauling ass, And you'd go, oh my God, what? And every one of those boats, I came to know exactly what that felt like.
Right.
To the guide and the angler, a team.
The excitement.
And it was 2 people with one mission to go into some secret, sacred place that they'd cooked up. And then it was your turn.
Were you nervous that first day in the Gold Cup?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you were.
How about the first fish you threw to?
Yeah.
I remember that very well.
I wasn't as nervous as the Hatteras, but I was plenty nervous. I don't know. Winning it, I think the only person at the awards banquet, that was probably the only person that was more excited than I was just to be there. I didn't have the knowledge and expertise that you had at that point. Still don't. But nobody loves this sport more than I do. Nobody.
I can see that because I know a little bit about your history in Boca Grande and, the evolution that you've had with your painting of the fish, the books that you've written. It is deeply embedded into your heart.
It's huge.
But we did a podcast with Frank Davis.
Great guy.
And he mentioned that when they had the jigs stopped over there, that you played a major role in that fishery and in conservation. Tell me about that.
It's a little bit like being at the grocery store and watching some thug trying to steal an old woman's purse, and it pisses you off. It was the love. I'm going to use your word, passion. Mm-hmm. Your book. It's pure passion. The care that you give to let a fish go, and you hold a tarpon. I'm going to get to that, but I have to say this first. You hold a tarpon boat side, and you look at that fish. Tommy and I took 4 big fish out of Homosassa.
Like 180 pounders.
Over one, they were between 182 and whatever the last one was. And you look at that fish and you put it together in your brain that at the time I was 70, 72, 71. Mm-hmm. And you go, that fish was swimming when I was born.
Right. Yeah.
Same age.
And then, gee whiz, when I graduated from elementary school, that fish was swimming. And then you start to put all this together. I met Janie, that fish was swimming, and we had the kids. And you can't.
It has a life.
It's incredible to think mm-hmm. that way. And so to see somebody throw all that away off to the side and snag that fish with a snagging machine. That's what they were using. Mm-hmm. It was a circle hook that big on top of a weighted jig.
Right.
Fished vertically.
Jigging it straight up into their
plain and simple, it was flossing.
Right.
Which is horizontal. They call it up north. That's flossing horizontal. This was vertical flossing.
Right.
And
but it took 2 years to get that banned, and I think Frank Davis was into like a $250,000 lawsuit.
That's right.
What kind of repercussions did you have on you?
I had the Hatteras in Gasparilla Marina. The guys would go by the boat and call me an MF, and my wife sitting there, and
So you were a target too.
Yeah, and they put a camera on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't start the boat, put it in gear until I swam under it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It got crazy. And then they did a newspaper thing, and I made some quotes in that, and it was.
It's
In fairness, a couple of those guys swung by the boat and said, "That's not how I roll. I'm sorry about that, but I don't do that." And so. There was some good guys.
Right.
And so my best friend, a guy that I grew up with since I was in my teens, Ken Wright, was chairman of the Florida Wildlife Commission. And I went to Ken, and Ken loves fishing, and he loves the tarpon. And I told him, I said, this is what they're doing. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to stop it. I want to in the worst way. And he said, okay, let's do it. And without Ken, wouldn't have happened, because none of us had that kind of knowledge and pull. And so it did take 2 years. It took 2 years because of the process that you have to go through. You have to get through the first vote and then the second. In Lakeland, we made it by 1 vote.
Wow.
And it was close. And some of the conservation groups that should have stayed with us didn't, one in particular, and we didn't, and we almost lost it. And but when we got it to Tallahassee, I don't know why, but I knew it was going to work. And it was all I thought about. I mean, I just
for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. And it was Frank and if I get started with the names, I'll forget somebody.
Yeah.
One name comes to mind is Mark Futch, who died of a heart attack sometime after that. Great guy, incredible guy. I don't like to fly, but I'd fly with him, and we'd fly up to Tallahassee, and then. And I'd always say to him, "We're going to get home, right?" Oh yeah. I said, okay. And he said, he always said, "Listen, I fly seaplanes. I don't crash seaplanes. Okay, just relax."
No, that's good.
But the vote came, and they passed it.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you still have your Hatteras?
No, sold it.
Yeah.
Sold it, and bought a 42 footer.
Right.
Sold that, and we're looking at another one now.
Well, you're 76 now. What's left for you? You know, is there
Another
anything
boat.
left on the list of the 25 list?
Grandchildren.
And
Grandchildren are on the list. That's what's on my list.
So you've dedicated your life now to your children and grandchildren.
Yeah, I mean,
you still fish, obviously.
Oh yeah, but Andy, I got to tell you, if I die tonight, I want to come back as me.
Yeah,
an incredible family, an incredible life. But you know, I'm doing everything I can do to stay in the game with Tarpon. I just had a new shoulder put in. And the primary thing that was in my mind is I can't fight a Tarpon. And I'm not, that's the part of the game that I love the most. I love to eat. I love that. And I you know, there's not a part of it that I don't like, but I like fighting big fish. I love fighting big fish. You never, ever know what that fish is going to do, no matter how many of them catch, until you take the wrapper off of it. It's like a Christmas present. And you stick that fish, and some of them jump, some of them don't jump, some of them scream offline, some of them dodge under the boat. You don't know. And but big fish, fighting big fish, it's like getting in a fight. And I learned so much about that from Tommy, and over the years of us fishing together. And I love pulling on fish.
that's really cool.
And I love 16. I don't fish anything but 16.
Right.
So you know I don't think you can get too old for that. Tom Evans,
He's still doing it.
he's still doing it. If he can do it, I can.
You can too.
know. And so, yeah, just keep putting new parts in. You'll be around. I'll be around here forever. I told Janie, I said, when I die, you take me to the salvage yard and get all this metal out of me. You'll have some money then. But no.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, listen, Bill, it's so awesome to be with you, and thank you for these the gifts that you've painted for us that we're going to take back to our homes. And I'd love to get this stainless steel tarpon that you've
We will discuss that
built
all the way. I want to say one more thing. What you guys are doing, you remember I told you about telling Scott Tripp, don't ever forget this?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, that's what happens, is that people forget. Not that he would, but you're making sure that these things aren't forgotten. You put them on film, and you're saving a lot.
saving history, and it's all it's Nikki's vision.
Look at it.
I had to bug him for years, but we're finally doing it.
I heard you say on one of your podcasts that you all are better friends than you are
Father-son.
father-son.
Oh, 100%.
And
I want to kick him in the teeth sometimes, but he's my best friend.
Well, I'm that way with our daughter, Shannon. Nobody I'd rather have on the front of my skiff throwing at tarpon than my daughter. She's awesome, and she can throw a fly rod. Oh, good Lord. And my son, Billy. And now suddenly, I've got 4 grandsons.
You're a busy pusher now.
I love it. I love it. I do. So
You're going to be pushing that boat till you're 100.
I'm going to be there.
Well,
I'm not going anywhere.
I can still see you have a fiery heart for the passion for the Poon.
Amen.
And it's great to meet you, Bill. Thanks
My
so
pleasure.
much for coming on.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, buddy.
Listen, you're an icon.
Oh,
To shake hands with you,
well, thank you.
What a pleasure.
You're so kind.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
What I saw is West Side Story. What I saw is just a